I used to believe homes kept the memories we couldn't hold ourselves. Echoes in floorboards, shadows in corners, whispers in the drywall. That belief didn't come from superstition, but from growing up in a house that never felt empty, even when everyone was gone. After my mom passed, I learned how silence can feel heavier than sound. Maybe that's why I convinced myself I was ready to stay alone again. Months after the breakup, months after anxiety clawed its way into my sleep, my roommate Jenna was flying to Seattle for a 3-day conference. "You gonna be okay without me?" she asked, half teasing as she zipped her suitcase. "I'll be fine," I told her, giving Jasper's head a pat. "He'll protect me if anything weird happens." Jasper, my aging golden retriever, wagged his tail, though slower than he used to. That first night was supposed to be simple. Frozen pizza, a dumb movie, a glass of boxed wine. Nothing dramatic. But Jasper refused to settle. He stood stiff in the hallway, facing the front door with his fur raised. His growl was low, shaky, like he wasn't sure if he wanted to warn or run. "Buddy, what do you see?" I whispered. At 2 a.m., the knocking started. Not knuckles. Something dull, rhythmic, like a pebble tapped gently against wood. 3 taps, a pause, then 3 more. I peeked through the peephole, heart hammering. No one. Just the porch light flickering, swaying like something had passed beneath it. By morning, the door stood wide open. My breath stalled. I knew I had locked it. Jasper wouldn't go near it. And on the floor, muddy prints. Too small for a person, too large for an animal. And I knew something was wrong. Saturday night, I tried to convince myself the door incident had an explanation. Maybe the latch hadn't caught. Maybe the wind pushed it open. Maybe Jasper had startled himself, and everything fed off that panic. "Okay," I told him as we ate dinner. "No ghosts, no intruders, just us being dramatic." But Jasper didn't buy it. His ears kept swiveling toward the ceiling. At 11:47 p.m., I heard footsteps above me. Slow, steady, measured. We live in a 1-story home. I froze mid-step, gripping the back of the sofa. "Hello?" I called out, instantly regretting it. The footsteps paused, then resumed, pacing in the same rhythm as last night's knock. Jasper whined, pressing himself against my leg, trembling. I tried calling neighbors, but every call went straight to voicemail. I tried Jenna, same result. I told myself the storm outside must be messing with reception, but the lie didn't land. The lights flickered at 1 a.m., plunging the house into stretches of pitch-black silence. Every time the lights returned, the footsteps were closer, not above me anymore, around me, parallel, stalking the hallway. At 3 a.m., the house died completely. No power, no hum of the fridge, no furnace kicking on, which made the tapping on my bedroom door unmistakable. 3 soft taps, a pause, 3 again. "Maya," a voice whispered. My name, but sounding eerily like my own voice, spoken through someone else's throat. When I cracked the door, Jasper bolted past me, snarling into the dark hallway at something invisible but unmistakably present. A cold gust slid past me, whispering along my neck. Something unseen moved through the house, and the doors began slamming. Fast, slow, random, like someone testing how well the house was nailed together. And then drawers opened in the kitchen. Someone, something, was exploring. By Sunday morning, I hadn't slept. My nerves were shot, my eyes gritty, my hands trembling. Jasper wouldn't leave my side, not even to drink water unless I walked with him. I checked the front door again just to prove I still lived in a world with rules. It was cracked open, just an inch. I had locked it. I was certain. I shut it, engaged the deadbolt, and placed a dining chair underneath the knob. "Try getting through that," I muttered, though I didn't believe the chair would stop anything. Jasper sniffed the threshold, then backed away, whining. Another muddy print had appeared. This one pointed inward. By afternoon, paranoia crept in like mold. I searched every inch of the house. Pantry, closets, under furniture. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No broken windows. No footprints across the hardwood beyond the door. At sunset, I called my dad. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "You sound rough." "I think someone's been coming into the house." "You need me to call someone?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know if it's someone or something." Dad paused. "Is Jasper acting strange?" "Very." "Well," he sighed, "dogs don't lie." I set up my phone to record the hallway overnight, propping it against a bookshelf aimed directly at the door. I lay in bed fully clothed, Jasper pressed tightly against me. The house felt alive, breathing around me, listening. In the dead stillness before dawn, the tapping returned. 3 knocks, a breath, another 3. Jasper growled but wouldn't move. When I finally checked the recording, the footage made my blood run cold. The door was slowly swinging open, but not onto my porch. It opened onto a darkness deeper than night, a void. And from that void, a pale hand reached in. Just before the recording cut to static, I replayed the video until my phone overheated, as if watching it enough times might force a rational explanation to form. But logic wasn't the problem. Belief was. I couldn't deny what I saw, and the more I accepted it, the more the house seemed to change around me. The air felt heavier, colder, damp like a basement. The walls creaked in patterns. 2 knocks, then 3, then 2 again. By noon, I packed a bag. Clothes, laptop, chargers, Jasper's leash. I didn't care if it was dramatic. I just needed to leave. When I stepped into the hallway, Jasper suddenly froze, muscles locking as he stared toward the kitchen. "What is it?" I whispered. A drawer slid open, then another, then the cabinet doors. Not violently, slowly, like someone was choosing. I grabbed Jasper's collar. "We're leaving. Now." As we reached the living room, something clattered in the kitchen, silverware scattering across the tile. Then a voice, soft and breathy, whispered from behind the refrigerator. "Maya, don't go yet." I ran. I threw the deadbolt, yanked open the door, and nearly fell backward. Outside was bright, sunny, normal. Birds chirping, the neighbor's sprinkler running. A perfectly ordinary suburban morning. It felt wrong, like stepping out of a nightmare too fast. I carried Jasper to the car, hands shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice. Just as I opened the driver's door, I heard it behind me. 3 taps on the front door. I didn't turn around. I floored the gas and didn't stop driving until I reached a hotel on the far side of town. I didn't go back for 3 days, and when I finally returned with Jenna, the house was spotless. Nothing moved. Nothing wrong. But the recording was gone. Deleted. I never moved back into that house. Jenna supported the decision immediately. "If your dog's scared," she said, "I'm scared. End of story." We found a new apartment downtown, a top-floor unit with bright windows, thin walls, and neighbors close enough that silence never feels oppressive. But some things followed anyway. The first time I heard it in the new place, it was a Tuesday around midnight. 3 soft taps against the door. I froze in the kitchen. Jasper whined and hid behind my legs. I checked the peephole. No one there. Just an empty hallway and the faint buzz of the exit sign. I stepped back, heart pounding. Another 3 taps. Soft, patient. I whispered, "I'm not opening it." Something exhaled through the crack beneath the door, and a thin draft slid across my feet, cold as the hallway in my old home. The knocking stopped. But ever since, I hear it some nights, Always the same pattern. Always gentle, as if whatever stands on the other side isn't in a hurry. Jasper refuses to sleep anywhere except right beside my bed now. And sometimes, when the lights are off and the city grows quiet, his ears perk up. He listens, he trembles, and he waits. I don't know what I brought with me when I fled that house. Maybe nothing. Maybe something old, patient, and willing to wait longer than I can hide. But I know one truth now. Some doors don't stay shut just because you close them. When something feels wrong, trust your instincts, even if you can't yet explain the danger. Ignoring fear doesn't make you brave. Listening to it can keep you alive. People always ask why I chose to live alone in a Victorian rental, one with crooked floors, narrow hallways, and a staircase that moaned louder than an old porch swing in winter. The honest answer? It was cheap. Too cheap. And when you're trying to rebuild your life after a messy breakup, square footage matters more than common sense. My partner, Elise, traveled often for work, but this was the first time she was gone for a full week. I tried to convince myself it would be good for me, a chance to prove I wasn't as dependent or anxious as she claimed. The only company I had was Willow, my black cat, who strutted around the house like she owned the place. She acclimated immediately. Me? Not so much. The landlord, Mrs. Hollis, was in her late 70s and always wore oversized sunglasses, even indoors. During the walkthrough, she paused at the heavy antique mirror bolted at the top of the stairs. "You can repaint, replace fixtures, rearrange anything you want," she said. "But this mirror stays. It's original to the house. You must never take it down." Her tone was too stern for a request, too uneasy for a rule. I laughed nervously. I wasn't planning on redecorating anyway. She didn't laugh back. The first 2 nights were normal enough. A few creaks, some cold spots, but it was an old house, and I wasn't about to let my imagination win. Then Willow began hissing at the mirror. Not at her reflection, at the mirror itself. Her back arched, tail puffed out, pupils blown wide. "Willow, knock it off," I muttered, scooping her up, but she wouldn't stop staring, and that's when the footsteps started. Slow, steady, coming up the stairs toward a floor that should have been empty. The footsteps were too heavy to ignore. They creaked up the staircase like someone weighing at least twice my size. When I flicked on the hallway light, no one was there, just the mirror, catching the glow and reflecting a distorted stretch of the railing. Willow slunk behind me, her fur bristling. She stared at the top step, growling low. "Seriously?" I whispered. "Don't do this to me tonight." I pressed my palm to the mirror. It felt colder than the air, wet almost. That's when I saw them. Fingerprints. Huge ones. Smudged across the glass like someone had pressed both hands flat against it, trying to see through. "I didn't touch this," I muttered. I wiped the prints away. Immediately the surface fogged up again. From inside, like someone was breathing behind the glass. That night I slept downstairs on the sofa, or tried to. Around 3 a.m., something moved above me. Slow, dragging steps. Willow paced for hours, tail twitching, ears pointed upstairs. Morning didn't bring relief. When I went up to grab fresh clothes, I found the mirror slightly tilted away from the wall, bolts strained, as if something had pushed from the other side. I called Mrs. Hollis. "Hi, the mirror's loose," I said. Silence. Then her voice, flat and sharp. "You must not touch it. Do you hear me? Do not try to take it down. Not for anything." "Okay, but..." "I won't come out there. Just leave it alone." She hung up. That evening, I found a new smudge on the mirror. Not a fingerprint. A streak. As if something inside had dragged a hand downward. Willow sat across from it all night, staring without blinking. I couldn't shake the feeling something was watching us back. By the 4th night, Willow refused to leave my side. When I carried her to bed, she perched at the foot, ears pinned forward, eyes fixed on the hallway like she was tracking something I couldn't see. At 4:13 a.m., a whisper threaded through the dark. Liam? My name. Drawn out. Quiet. Wrong. I snapped the lamp on. Willow leapt off the bed, clawing frantically at the bedroom door like she was trying to keep something out. A crash thundered from upstairs, so loud dust drifted from the ceiling. Jesus, I breathed, grabbing my phone. No service. Not a single bar. I opened the door. Willow shot down the hall ahead of me. The house wasn't freezing, but the air around me felt like it had been drained of every bit of warmth. The mirror was tilted even farther outward, at least an inch. The top bolt had torn halfway out of the plaster. What the hell? I whispered. Willow hissed at the gap between the mirror and the wall. I pressed my ear to the plaster. Tap, 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 knuckles, inside the wall. I staggered back. Nope. No freaking way. I tried the landlord again. Straight to voicemail. I left a message anyway. Something's in the wall or behind the mirror. I don't know. But this isn't structural. It's... Please call me. An hour passed. No call. Willow meowed sharply, staring at the mirror with a desperate, confused sound I'd never heard from her. I grabbed my toolbox with shaking hands. I know you said not to touch it, I muttered, but you're not here. The tapping behind the mirror grew louder, faster, like something knew I was coming. And for the first time since moving in, I was sure I wasn't alone. By evening, Willow was gone. One moment she was weaving between my legs while I heated leftovers. The next, she bolted up the stairs like someone had called her name. I heard her yowl, a sharp, panicked cry, from behind the mirror. I dropped the plate. Willow! Her cries echoed again, muffled, desperate. I pressed my hand to the glass. Hold on, girl. I'm right here. It vibrated faintly beneath my palm. Not from the house, from something behind it. I grabbed a pry bar and wedged it under the frame. The first bolt popped, sending a crack through the plaster. Cold air blasted out, strong enough to sting my eyes. The second bolt screeched free. Come on, I whispered. Willow's paw pressed against the other side of the glass, inside the mirror. But the room behind her wasn't mine. It was darker, vast, like she stood in a hallway that stretched forever. Willow! I shouted. The mirror rippled outward like disturbed water. A hand, pale, stretched thin, too long, pushed through the glass. Its fingers brushed my wrist, ice cold. I stumbled back. The pry bar clattered down the stairs. The hand pushed farther, followed by an arm, a shadowed shape behind it. Then the mirror snapped shut. The bolts slammed back into the wall on their own. The glass sealed, silent, motionless. Willow's cries faded, as if moving down a tunnel. I stood shaking, staring at the mirror that no longer showed my reflection, just empty black. Then, slowly, my reflection seeped back into place. But Willow's didn't. I didn't sleep. I sat on the hallway floor, back against the wall, staring at that mirror until sunrise. Every so often, I thought I heard faint tapping, 3 light scratches like paws. At dawn, I made my decision. I packed a suitcase, called Elise, told her everything. Liam, you sound terrified, she said gently. I am. I'm leaving. I can't stay another night. She promised to come help after her flight landed that evening. I dragged my suitcase toward the door, only to find the mirror leaning against the wall beside it. Not upstairs, not bolted in place. Just there, perfectly intact. I hadn't moved it. I knew I hadn't. I bolted outside without grabbing my bags. I didn't even lock the door. I drove to a hotel and stayed there until Elise arrived. When we returned the next morning, the mirror was back at the top of the stairs, bolted tight, No cracks, no damage. As if nothing had ever happened. I put in a notice to vacate. The next day, my packed boxes sat ready by the door. When I woke, the mirror stood in the doorway of the living room, blocking the exit, bolted to the wall again, like the house had decided I wasn't leaving. That night, at 3:17 a.m., I heard Willow, tap, 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 soft, rhythmic, from the other side of the mirror, waiting. Some things in life demand boundaries, and if you ignore the first signs that something is wrong, you may find yourself trapped by what you refuse to face. Trust your instincts, protect your peace, and when something feels off, never wait for it to get worse. People think a quiet life is boring, but after the chaos I grew up in, quiet was all I ever wanted. My childhood home was the kind where arguments cracked through the walls like lightning. My parents loved each other the way storms love the coastline, beautiful from a distance, destructive up close. I learned early that noise meant danger. Silence meant survival. So as soon as I could afford it, I bought a small house on a cul-de-sac in a sleepy Colorado suburb. It was the kind of place where nothing ever happens. Kids leave their bikes on lawns, sprinklers come on at 6 a.m. sharp, and neighbors wave at you with the same two-finger salute they've done for 20 years. Predictable, safe, quiet. Exactly the opposite of the life I ran from. The house was old but sturdy. Dark hardwood floors, a narrow hallway, a porch swing that creaked when the wind hit it just right. I spent my evenings reading on the couch or cooking something simple, sometimes watching the local news until I drifted off. I had no partner, no kids, no pets. Just me, a job I didn't hate, and a routine that felt like a blanket tucked around my life. I installed a smart doorbell system mostly because my mom nagged me about single people and safety. It worked flawlessly for months. Crisp video, instant alerts, motion detection that could pick up a squirrel 10 feet away. Honestly, it felt excessive, but it made her sleep better, and it made me feel like I had a second pair of eyes. For a long time, nothing happened. No weird visitors, no missed packages, no reason for concern. And then, at 1:40 a.m. on a Thursday, my doorbell rang for the very first time, and my life's quietness shattered like glass. The first ring pierced my sleep, sharp and cheerful in a way that felt wrong for the hour. I rolled over, grabbed my phone, and checked the live feed. The porch lights were on, yellow and steady. The camera had recorded the moment the bell was pressed. My phone even replayed the click. But no one was standing there. No late-night delivery driver, no teenager pulling a prank, no shadow moving across the frame. Just the empty porch swing swaying gently like someone had brushed past it. I told myself it was a glitch. Tech fails sometimes. I muted the alert and crawled back into bed. 10 minutes later, it rang again. This time, something in me tightened. The camera again showed the bell depress, clear as day, but the frame was empty. I felt the kind of cold that doesn't come from winter air, the kind of cold that starts inside your bones. I got up, walked to the door, and pressed my eye against the peephole. Nothing, but the air felt thick, like someone had been standing there a moment before and stepped out of sight. I locked the door. Then I locked the deadbolt. Then I turned on every light in the house, like brightness alone could push away whatever was happening. At 2:03 a.m., the bell rang a third time, but my phone stayed silent. No alert. No recording. The camera showed nothing. The chime echoed inside the house only, like someone had cut the connection between the device and the outside world. My breath hitched. This wasn't just a malfunction. This was deliberate. The bell rang again. Faster, harder, like someone was leaning on it. Then the sound stretched, warping, the chime slowing into something long and distorted. A low, humming groan filled the house. And then, a whisper, soft, human. Let me in. My doorbell didn't support two-way audio. I bought the cheap version that only recorded video and sent alerts. There was no mic, no speaker, no way for anyone outside my home to talk through it. But the whisper came again, this time clearer. I don't want to stand outside anymore. I stood frozen in the hallway, feeling every hair on my arms rise. My phone lit up with a notification. Front door camera offline. Device disconnected. The bell chimed once more, one final haunting note, and then silence swallowed the house. I backed away until my shoulders hit the living room wall. I didn't move for almost a minute. My mind raced, flipping through explanations that didn't exist. Maybe someone hacked the system. Maybe the wiring was damaged. Maybe I was overtired hearing things. I forced myself to speak, my voice cracking out loud. "Who's there?" For a moment, nothing. Then a whisper came again, but not from the porch. From the living room speaker behind me. "I know you can hear me." I spun so fast I almost fell. The speaker was dark, no power light, no Bluetooth connection. I unplugged it, threw the cord across the room, and shoved the speaker under a blanket like it was an animal I needed to trap. I called the smart doorbell support line, straight to voicemail. I texted my neighbor, Mike, "Are you awake? Something weird is happening." No response. The rest of the night was an unending stretch of waiting. Every sound felt suspicious. A creak, a breath of air, the hum of the fridge. I didn't sleep, not even for a second. When dawn finally bled across the street, I opened the door to check the porch. That's when I saw them. Muddy footprints. On the inside of my screened porch. Between the locked screen door and my front door. Right where someone would stand if they'd been there all night. I didn't want to get close to the footprints, but my brain needed confirmation. I crouched down and touched the dried mud with one finger. It smeared. Real. Human. Fresh. My stomach dropped. I checked the screen door. Locked tight. The latch wasn't broken or bent. No signs of prying or tampering. So unless this person had a key to a door I'd never given anyone access to, they had gotten inside without opening anything. That made no sense. Shaken, I checked the app's event history. All logs were gone. Every recording stored over the past 2 months erased. Not corrupted. Deleted. My finger hovered over the call button for the police. But I hesitated. What would I even tell them? A ghost hacked my doorbell and stood on my porch all night? I needed something more concrete. That night I stayed awake intentionally. I sat on the couch with every light on, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Midnight passed, 1 a.m., then 1:30. At 1:40 a.m. sharp, the exact minute from the night before, the doorbell chimed again. But this time the sound didn't come from the front door. It came from my bedroom. I jumped up and ran down the hall. The chime echoed softly, muffled, like it was coming from inside the walls. "Stop!" I yelled, voice cracking. "Just stop!" The ringing stopped instantly. A beat of silence followed. Then, tap, tap, tap. 3 slow knocks on my bedroom window. I backed away, shaking so hard my teeth clicked. The window blinds were down. I couldn't see outside, but a voice came through the glass. Quiet, almost sad. "Why won't you let me in?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. The knocking stopped. Then footsteps crunched along the side of the house, slow, dragging footsteps like someone was pacing, over and over. I stayed awake until sunrise again, too terrified to move. By the 3rd day, exhaustion felt like a physical weight. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't slept. Every noise set me off. Every shadow felt like a person. I finally broke and called the police. Officer Daniels came out, kind guy in his 40s with tired eyes. He checked the porch, took photos of the footprints, and examined the screen door latch. "No signs of forced entry," he finally said, "but we'll add extra patrols in the area." "What about the voices?" I asked quietly. He paused, his expression tightening. We can't investigate a malfunctioning speaker, but keep your doors locked, okay? He didn't believe me. Not fully. That night I begged a friend, Evan, to stay over. We set up 2 chairs facing the front door. He joked at first, but when the clock hit 1:40 a.m., he went completely silent. We waited. 1:41, 1:43, 1:48. Maybe it's over, he whispered. Then the porch light flickered. Once, twice. Then the doorbell chimed. I grabbed my phone. The app opened, and for the first time, there was someone on the porch camera. A man. Tall, face obscured, head tilted in a strange, unnatural angle. Motionless. He wasn't pressing the doorbell. The doorbell was ringing on its own. What the hell? Evan breathed. Then the figure lifted one hand and pressed it against the lens. The screen went black. A whisper came through the living room speaker, soft and almost relieved. I knew you were awake. Evan bolted for the door, but I screamed for him to stop. Something slammed against the other side, hard enough to rattle the frame. Another slam. Another. Then the voice whispered right behind us. Let me in. We turned. No one was there. The front door went quiet. The house went silent. The porch camera flickered back online. The porch was empty. The man was gone. Evan left at sunrise and hasn't returned my calls since. I'm writing this as the sun goes down again. I know the doorbell will ring tonight. I don't know what happens if I finally open the door, but the whisper always sounds more desperate, and desperation always escalates. Sometimes we ignore the first signs of danger because we don't want to disturb the quiet life we worked so hard to build. But safety isn't found in silence. It's found in paying attention to the things that don't feel right. Trust your instincts. Fear isn't always irrational. Sometimes it's the only warning you'll ever get. I grew up in the kind of rural American neighborhood where adults had this odd obsession with basements. Tornado shelters, canned food stockpiles, concrete walls painted beige. Basements were supposed to make you feel safe. But they never did for me. Even as a kid, I used to stand at the bottom of my parents' stairs, staring into that half-lit cavern, convinced something was watching me from behind the furnace. My dad said it was childhood imagination. My mom said I watched too many scary movies. I said nothing, because back then, I learned quickly that adults didn't want the truth, only reassurance. Fast forward 20 years. I thought those childhood fears stayed buried. But when I moved into a small rental house on the edge of town, they came crawling back. The house was nothing special. 1 bedroom, a creaky porch, and a half-underground basement I only used for laundry. The landlord bragged about how efficient the basement's design was, with those low ground-level windows letting natural light in. They didn't feel like windows to me. They felt like eyes, round, unsettling portals in the concrete wall. During the day, they showed the legs of passing cats or drifting leaves. At night, they reflected back a warped version of the basement behind me. I avoided looking at them directly. I avoided going down there at night altogether. Still, life was simple. Quiet job at the hardware store. Even quieter evenings. I wasn't running from anything or looking for anything. I just wanted a place that felt stable. But storms in this part of the state tend to change things quickly. 3 weeks ago, lightning rolled through like a freight train, and the power cut out. Everything went black at once. I remember thinking it was just another storm, nothing unusual. But that was before I saw the girl's face pressed against the basement window. Nothing prepares you for a moment your brain can't rationalize. Nothing prepares you for a truth you spent a lifetime pretending wasn't real. The storm hit with a kind of violence that felt personal. Thunder cracked so hard the window frames rattled. I grabbed the only light source I could find, an old candle I kept for emergencies, and headed downstairs to check for leaks. The basement smelled like damp concrete and detergent. Shadows stretched across the walls, smooth one second, jagged the next. As I turned to go back upstairs, lightning flashed bright white, and that's when I saw her. A girl, face pressed flat against the glass, hair streaming with rainwater, eyes wide and hollow, staring straight into mine. It lasted barely a second before darkness swallowed her image. I froze halfway up the stairs, candle shaking so hard wax spilled onto my hand. No scream came out, no thought formed, just a cold, paralyzing certainty that she had been real. Then the rational side of my brain fought back. The basement windows sat at ground level. Anyone could crouch down and look in. Maybe it was a lost kid, a soaked teenager, someone who needed help. That explanation wasn't comforting, but at least it made sense. Lightning struck again. The window was empty. I whispered to myself. It was a reflection. It had to be. Because if it wasn't, if it really was a girl outside in that storm, why didn't she knock on my door instead of crouching in the mud? Knock, knock, knock. 3 gentle taps on the glass. Polite, calm, wrong. My breath hitched. The candle flame spasmed in the draft rolling through the basement. I turned slowly toward the window. The knocking stopped. Then it came again. But from the window on the opposite wall, she had moved. Fast. Too fast. "Hello?" I called, though my voice shook. "Do you need help?" No answer. Only the storm, roaring like it was trying to bury the sound of something worse. I backed up the stairs without taking my eyes off the windows. When I reached the top step, I felt the temperature drop behind me, like something had followed me up. I didn't look back, not yet. I locked myself in the upstairs bathroom, heart slamming against my ribs like it wanted out. I sat on the cold tile with the candle still flickering beside me. Every time I tried to calm down, another sound drifted up from below. Soft tapping, moving window to window, like she was pacing along the wall, mapping the perimeter of the house, not trying to come in, trying to understand it. Around 3 a.m., the tapping stopped. The silence felt heavier than the storm. I cracked open the bathroom door and listened. The house creaked normally again. The storm softened. I stayed awake until sunrise, every muscle wired tight. When the lights finally returned, I forced myself downstairs. Every step felt like a dare. All 4 basement windows were fogged from the outside. Wet condensation streaked across the glass. But it wasn't rain. These streaks were shaped, thin lines, curved smears, finger trails, small hands, as if someone had pressed palms against the window, dragging them slowly downward. My stomach turned. I called the police. Officer Hale came out, took one look, and frowned. "Looks like fingerprints," he said, leaning close. "Kid-sized. Did someone break in?" I asked. "No sign of it. Mud's undisturbed." He stepped outside and shined his flashlight over the yard. No footprints, no depressions, not even a scuffed patch of dirt. "That's impossible," I whispered. He shrugged. "Storm probably washed it away." "But the fingerprints are still here," I argued. He paused, but didn't have an answer. Before leaving, he gave me a look that hovered between concern and doubt. "If anything else happens, call us." But he didn't believe me. Not fully. That night, after convincing myself I'd imagined more than I saw, I went to bed early. I kept the light on, checked the windows twice. Still, near 2 a.m., just as I was drifting into uneasy sleep, a tap echoed against my bedroom window. Then another. Then one more. Soft, polite, patient. I didn't move, because I knew she'd found the next window on her list. I don't know how long I lay there, holding my breath as the tapping continued. 3 slow knocks, a pause, then 3 more. Like she was introducing herself, or waiting for me to respond. Finally, gathering what courage I had left, I slipped out of bed and crept across the room. I didn't open the blinds. Instead, I pressed my ear against them. Nothing. Just the storm's fading drizzle. "Hello?" I whispered, barely audible. "Are you hurt?" Silence. I lifted the blinds a half-inch and peeked outside. Nothing but the empty yard. No girl, no footprints, no movement, just like the basement. The next morning, I tried to rationalize everything. I went to work, tried to keep busy, told myself stress was making me hallucinate. People don't just appear at windows with no tracks. But when I got home, I noticed something new. A faint handprint on the outside of my bedroom window, and another, lower, like she'd crouched, and a third, almost insignificantly small, right near the edge. 3 sizes, 3 shapes, all aligned, like a family, or something that didn't keep the same form twice. I scrubbed the glass until my arms ached, but the prints wouldn't fully come off. It was like the moisture had seeped into the paint itself. That night, I went to bed early again, trying to ignore the tension stretching across my chest. Around 1:15 a.m., I heard movement. Not outside, inside. Soft footsteps at the bottom of the stairs. Slow, deliberate. My heart stopped. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, but the line didn't ring. No call connected. My service was full, but nothing went through. A whisper drifted up the stairwell, faint and careful. "Are you awake?" Not a girl's voice. A woman's. Low, steady, too calm. The bedroom light flickered once. Then the tapping started again. Not on the window, on the bedroom door. I braced my back against the wall, phone clutched, breath sharp and uneven. The tapping on the door was slow at first, gentle, almost rhythmic. Then it shifted. The knocks moved up the doorframe, like fingers tracing along it, feeling the grain of the wood. I whispered through the crack in my voice, "Who are you? What do you want?" The tapping stopped. Then, through the door, a soft sigh. "I don't know this place." I froze. The voice wasn't angry. It wasn't hostile. It sounded lost. "I don't know this house," she repeated, voice trembling. "But you do." I didn't answer. Couldn't. The doorknob twitched. Just a millimeter. Enough that I heard the metal shift. I lunged forward, gripping it tight before it could turn further. "Please don't," I breathed. Her reply was almost a child's tone this time. "I need to see how it fits." "What fits?" I whispered. "The rooms," she said simply. "Your house is warm. Mine is dark." My lungs tightened. "Where is your house?" Silence. Then, behind the glass. A cold burst of air swept under the door, carrying the smell of wet earth. My eyes watered. My hands shook uncontrollably. Then everything stopped. The footsteps retreated. One step, another, another. Down the hall, down the stairs. The house grew still. A heavy, suffocating stillness. I stayed by the door until sunlight crept through the blinds. When I finally went downstairs, the basement windows were fogged again. This time, a single phrase was smeared across the largest pane in uneven streaks. "Let me learn it." My blood ran cold, because the handwriting wasn't childlike. It was mine. I still live in the house. I still hear tapping some nights. And sometimes when lightning flashes, I swear I see a reflection pressed against the glass. Only I can't tell if it's her or if it's me. Fear is often a warning we train ourselves to ignore. But when something feels wrong, truly wrong, it's better to trust your instincts than dismiss them. Not every threat makes footprints. Not every danger announces itself. And sometimes the things we fear most are the ones we try hardest to convince ourselves aren't real. I used to think my life was finally calming down. After years of juggling a full-time job, night classes, and 3 roommates who treated quiet hours like a cute suggestion rather than a house rule, I convinced myself I deserved a peaceful weekend. So when my roommates, Brooke, Alana, and Christy, planned a girls' trip to the mountains, I practically shoved their suitcases into the car for them. The moment they pulled out of the driveway, I locked the door, kicked off my shoes, and breathed in that rarest of suburban luxuries. Silence. Real silence. Not muffled chatter through the walls or someone blasting music while cooking eggs at midnight. Just calm. I spent that Friday doing everything I never got to do without noise crashing through the house, long shower, good movies, cleaning the kitchen without it immediately being destroyed again. I even cooked pasta just for myself and actually sat down to eat it while it was still warm. By 11:30 p.m., I curled into bed with the window cracked open. The air smelled like early autumn, cool, a little sweet, and full of the false promise that nothing bad happens in quiet neighborhoods. But at 2:14 a.m., the first knock came. 3 soft taps. Not urgent, not demanding, almost polite. My eyes snapped open. Nobody knocks at 2 in the morning unless they're drunk, confused, or dangerous. Maybe all 3. I waited. Then 3 more taps, a little louder, a little less polite. Every ounce of comfort I'd felt earlier evaporated, replaced by a cold pinch in my stomach. Something didn't feel right, and that was the moment my peaceful weekend started to unravel. I slipped out of bed and crept toward the front door, staying quiet like the house had taught me to all these years. When I pressed my eye to the peephole, a wave of something deeper than fear washed through me. No one was there. Not a shadow, not a porch light reflection, nothing. "Who is it?" I called out, trying to keep my voice firm. Silence. I double-locked the door and backed away. I tried to convince myself it was probably some drunk guy from the next street over. But when the knocking didn't return, I managed to settle back into bed. 15 minutes later, the knocking came again. This time, from the back door. Precise, rhythmic. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. My breath caught in my throat. The back door wasn't visible from the street. It was tucked behind a cluster of overgrown bushes my roommates always swore we'd trim but never did. No stranger should even know it existed. I grabbed my phone, hands trembling. The screen displayed a mocking message. No service. Perfect. Just perfect. The knocking grew faster, more insistent, like whoever was out there was losing patience. And then, nothing. Total silence. I stood completely still, trying to hear past the pounding of my heartbeat. That's when I heard it. A faint creak from the living room, the kind of sound old wood makes when someone steps on it. But this creak wasn't random. It was slow, weighted, deliberate. I felt my skin tighten. Someone wasn't knocking anymore. Someone was inside the house. I backed down the hallway, each step softer than the last. The living room doorway cast a long rectangle of darkness across the hall floor, and in that darkness, a shadow shifted. A human outline. Broad shoulders. Still as a statue. I didn't think. I ran. I darted into my bedroom, slammed the door, locked it, and shoved my desk chair under the handle. I crouched behind the bed, phone clutched so hard my fingertips went numb. The house settled into a suffocating quiet. No creaks, no footsteps, no breaths besides my own. Then the floorboards groaned again. Slow, heavy footsteps, coming down the hall, coming toward my door. I pressed myself tighter into the corner, trying not to cry. I heard the shadow stop right in front of my door. The air felt wrong, like it thickened around me. A soft whisper slid through the crack under the door. "I know you're awake." My stomach turned to ice. I didn't recognize the voice. It wasn't deep or high. It was hollow, like someone who hadn't spoken loudly in months. My phone suddenly buzzed as a signal returned. I didn't question it. My thumb trembled across the screen as I dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency?" I whispered. "Someone's in my house. Please, please send help." For the first time in my life, hearing a stranger's voice brought me relief. The footsteps retreated, soft and slow, as if the person already knew police were coming, as if they were familiar with the timeline. Minutes felt like hours. Then, sirens, lights, pounding on the front door. But when police entered the house, guns drawn, they found nothing. Absolutely nothing. No intruder, no forced entry, no open window, nothing to explain the whisper that chilled my bones. Police swept the house room by room. I followed close behind, shaking but refusing to be alone. There were no footprints on the tile, no smudges on the doorknobs, no sign that anyone had touched a thing. "You sure you heard someone?" one officer asked, and I hated the suspicion in his voice. "I didn't imagine the whisper," I said, "and I didn't imagine the knocking." The younger officer clicked on his flashlight. "Let's check the attic, just to be thorough." Attic? Our house technically had one, but none of us ever used it. The hatch was in the hallway ceiling, paint-chipped, stubborn, and sealed with a latch I'd always assumed was rusted shut. Except, the latch wasn't shut. It was slightly open. "Did any of you use this recently?" the officer asked. "No," I said. "We didn't even own a ladder." He pulled the string. The hatch groaned open, blowing down a gust of stale, dusty air. As his flashlight beam swept across the insulation, something caught the light. A blanket, a crumpled grocery bag, a stack of empty food wrappers, a small, hollowed-out space, carved deliberately, lived in, recently. "Oh my God," I whispered. The younger officer knelt and picked up one of the wrappers. "This hasn't been here long. Someone's been staying up here." The older officer sighed, shoulders tightening. He probably came down through the attic hatch, moved around the house, and went back up when we arrived. I tried not to pass out. Someone had been inches above our heads, eating, sleeping, listening. Someone who knew the house better than we did. Someone patient enough to wait for the perfect moment. And that moment had been when I was alone. The police stayed until sunrise, searching the block. They never found the intruder. No fingerprints, no footprints, no signs of forced entry anywhere. Maybe he slipped out while I was calling 911. Maybe he'd been watching for sirens. Maybe he knew exactly how much time he had. My roommates got home the next morning to find me on the couch, wrapped in a blanket and surrounded by police tape. They listened in terrified silence as I told them everything. Brooke asked, "Did he take anything?" "No," I said. "He didn't want things. He wanted time." We moved out 2 weeks later. None of us argued. None of us suggested staying. The landlord claimed he'd never heard of anything like that, but I could tell from his face he wasn't surprised. Sometimes I wake up at 2:14 a.m. without meaning to. Sometimes I think I hear steps on the ceiling. Sometimes I swear I hear that same whisper when the house settles at night. I know you're awake. I lock my windows now. I never ignore a knock, and I never assume quiet means safe. People talk about ghosts and monsters and supernatural threats, but the scariest thing I've ever known was real, alive and patient enough to hide inches above my head, waiting for the house to be empty, waiting for me to be alone, waiting for a moment that would have changed my life forever, or ended it. I used to think living off campus would make everything easier. No more paper-thin dorm walls, no more midnight fire drills, no more shared bathrooms with half the humanities department. Just me, my roommate Jess, and a tiny house that leaned a little to the left and made noises like it remembered the 1950s too vividly. Jess and I split everything: rent, chores, even the weird little quirks of the place. The creaky hallway, the windows that rattled when the wind pushed too hard, the boiler that sounded like it sighed whenever it kicked on. None of it bothered us. Honestly, I kind of liked the character the house had. It felt lived in, like an old friend muttering to itself. So when Jess told me she was heading home for a weekend trip, something about her mom's birthday and a surprise dinner, I didn't think much of it. I practically shoved her suitcase into her back seat. "Go, have fun. I'll hold down the fort," I said, waving her off like I wasn't already planning a weekend of shameless relaxation. Saturday night was perfect. Microwave pizza, fuzzy socks, a dumb horror movie I'd seen 5 times. I stretched out on my bed, laptop open, the house humming quietly around me. Every once in a while a floorboard popped like it was settling, but that was normal. Around 1 a.m., I paused the movie to grab a drink. That's when I heard it. Shh, shh, shh. It sounded like someone dragging their sleeve along the hallway wall. Slow, long, measured. I froze, listening hard. Then it stopped. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was the furnace or the wind brushing through the old siding. Houses make sounds, especially old ones. But 10 seconds later, I wasn't so sure. Back in bed, I restarted the movie, trying to sink back into the story. But my ears stayed alert, tuned to every tiny noise in the house. A few minutes passed quietly. I was starting to feel silly for being jumpy. Then I heard it. Not a shuffle, not a house groan, breathing. Soft, slow, too close. Right outside my bedroom door. The kind of breathing you hear when someone's leaning in, listening. My chest tightened like a belt was wrapping around it. I realized, too late, that I never actually locked my door. I'd gotten too comfortable with this house, too trusting. "Jess?" I whispered before my brain caught up and remembered she wasn't here. No answer. Just breathing. Closer now. I lunged for my phone, but it was dead. I'd forgotten to charge it after class. The blank screen stared back at me like it was mocking me. I sat completely still, my heart pounding so loud I wondered if whoever was outside could hear it through the door. Then, a whisper slid through the wood like a blade. "Are you sleeping?" I slapped both hands over my mouth to stop the sound I didn't mean to make. My whole body shook. I moved slowly, so slowly, slipping off the bed and lowering myself onto the floor. Then I crawled across the room, keeping low, keeping quiet. I squeezed behind the dresser, the dust coating my hands and face. I tucked my knees to my chest, praying I'd disappear into the shadows. The doorknob turned, clicked, jiggled, and then the door inched open. Just a sliver. I saw fingers curl around the edge of the doorframe, long, pale, purposeful. Someone was in my house. The door opened wider, slow enough to make every second feel like a scream that wouldn't come out. A tall, thin silhouette slipped inside, careful with each step. I couldn't see a face, only a shape, a human outline moving in the dark. They stood in the middle of my room for a long moment, breathing, listening. The air felt heavy around them, like they were deciding something. I pressed my back harder against the wall, trying to steady my own breath. Every tiny inhale felt too loud. The figure walked toward my bed. The mattress sank as they sat down, the springs groaning under their weight. They let out a long exhale, like they had been waiting for this exact moment. Waiting for me. I stayed frozen behind the dresser. Minutes passed, slow, agonizing minutes that stretched like hours. My legs cramped, my throat went dry, but I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't dare. From the bed, the figure whispered again, "I know you're here." I bit down hard on my lip until I tasted blood. Anything to keep from making a sound. 10 minutes, 15, 20. Then, the mattress shifted. The figure stood up. Their steps moved toward the door. They paused at the threshold, as if listening for one last sign of life. And then they slipped out. The door clicked shut behind them. I didn't wait. The second the hallway quieted, I crawled out, grabbed the first shoes I saw, and ran to the window. The cold glass burned my hands as I shoved it open. I climbed out barefoot, dropping into the wet grass, and sprinted down the street toward the neighbor's porch like the house was on fire behind me. Because in a way, it was. My neighbor, Mrs. Keller, nearly had a heart attack when I banged on her front door at 1:40 in the morning, sobbing and shaking like I'd just escaped a nightmare. I tried to explain, but the words tangled together. Breathing, door, someone inside, until she finally pulled me in and called the police herself. It took the patrol car less than 5 minutes to arrive. I watched from Mrs. Keller's living room window as officers circled my house with flashlights, guns drawn. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's horror. 20 minutes later, one officer approached the porch where I sat wrapped in a blanket. His expression told me something before he even opened his mouth. "Miss, you said you heard footsteps inside your room?" "Yes." "And someone sat on your bed?" I nodded. He exchanged a look with another officer, a look that twisted my stomach. There are signs someone's been staying on the property. Underneath it. My jaw tightened. Underneath? The officer motioned for me to follow. They led me around to the side of the house where a small hatch sat partially hidden behind bushes. I'd never noticed it before. The younger officer tugged it open. A sick smell of damp earth and stale sweat drifted out. His flashlight beam swept across what was inside. Blankets, food wrappers, empty water bottles, a backpack with no wallet, no phone, no ID, a pair of filthy boots. "Someone's been living in your crawl space," he said quietly. "For a while." My knees nearly buckled. Then I saw the final detail. Dirty footprints leading directly from the hatch, around the house, to my bedroom window, and straight to my door. I spent the rest of that night on Mrs. Keller's couch, my hands shaking every time a car passed or a branch scraped the siding. The police stayed on the street until sunrise, but they never found the man. Somewhere between me fleeing the house and them arriving, he'd vanished. Jess drove back first thing in the morning. She hugged me so tight my ribs hurt, apologizing over and over like any of this was her fault. She went pale when the officers showed her photos of the crawl space. "We're not staying here another night," she said, and for once, I didn't argue. We moved out within 2 weeks. The landlord tried to insist the crawl space had always been locked, but even he avoided looking directly at me when I asked how long it had really been since he checked it. Even now, months later, the memory clings to me. When I close my eyes at night, I still hear the whisper, "Are you sleeping?" I still picture the fingers curling around my doorframe, the quiet silhouette on my bed, the 20 minutes of waiting in the dark, while a stranger breathed in my room like he owned the air. I double-check locks now. I keep my phone charged, and I never ignore unusual noises, not creaks, not whispers, not anything. Because sometimes it isn't the house making those sounds. Sometimes it's someone who's been living closer than you think, waiting for a moment when you're alone, tired, and vulnerable. Someone who knows you're awake, and is waiting for you to fall asleep. Trust your instincts, secure your home, and never assume strange sounds are harmless. Safety often depends on paying attention to the small warnings your mind tries to dismiss. Staying alert can be the difference between danger passing by and danger stepping into your room. Living out in rural Montana had always been a comfort to me. Quiet roads, endless pines, and more sky than a person knew what to do with. But winter had a way of reminding you who was really in charge. Our county could get buried under snow overnight, and the most you could do was dig yourself out and hope the power stayed on. That particular week, a blizzard rolled through like a freight train. By evening, the wind had carved drifts up to my knees and swallowed the fences whole. I spent hours clearing off my steps and digging my car out, my breath freezing in my scarf. My nearest neighbor, old Mr. Halden, lived nearly a mile away. Most nights this far out, it felt like I had the whole world to myself. By 9 p.m., I figured I'd done enough for one day. I stepped outside with a bucket of salt to keep the porch from turning into an ice rink. That's when I noticed them. Shovel tracks. Not mine. These were wider, deeper, dragging trenches through the snow from the tree line straight toward my porch. My boots couldn't make prints like that, and neither could the small aluminum shovel I used. I scanned the forest. My breath caught when something dark shifted behind a pine, tall enough to be a person. But before I could process what I saw, the shape slipped out of sight. A cold I couldn't blame on the wind crawled up my spine. I backed into the house, locked the doors, and tried to convince myself it was just wildlife, or fallen branches, or anything sensible. But deep down, I knew better. I tried distracting myself with a book, but every gust of wind rattling the siding made me jump. Out here, storms made sounds, moans, rattles, little scratches against the windows, but nothing prepared me for the noise I heard at 11 p.m. Scrur, scrape, scrur, metal on wood, slow, intentional. I turned off the TV and listened, my heart thumping. The sound came from outside. Someone was shoveling, but not clearing snow. It sounded more like dragging. I crept upstairs and peeked through the bedroom window. The world was white and dimly lit by the porch light, and for a second I saw nothing. Then he came into view, a tall figure in a coat, shoulders hunched, dragging a long shovel behind him in steady, unforgiving pulls. He carved a line across the yard straight toward my house. The wind whipped snow around him, but he moved slow, deliberate, like the storm didn't touch him at all. Then he stopped, lifted his head, looked directly up at my window. I ducked down so fast I scraped my elbow on the wall. My breathing turned shallow. I counted to 10 before peeking again, just enough to see he had moved. Closer, only a few yards left between him and the porch. I whispered to no one, "Please, just go." But he didn't. He climbed my steps, each footstep groaning, and paused right outside the door. Another scrape, metal against the wooden boards. Then, silence. I grabbed my phone and dialed the sheriff. But dispatch said the roads were ice slick and officers were delayed. So I sat there in the dark, waiting, praying the sound wouldn't come again. Minutes stretched like hours. I sat on the floor with my back to the bed, phone clutched in both hands, listening so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. The house around me creaked from the cold, but nothing, no footsteps, no shoveling, no breathing, just silence thick enough to choke on. At some point, I forced myself to crawl toward the window again. I lifted the curtain an inch, terrified of what I'd see. At first, nothing but swirling snow. Then, there he was, standing on the porch, facing my door, shovel in hand, held upright like a walking cane. He didn't knock, he didn't speak, he didn't move a muscle, just stood there, still as a carving in the stormlight. I whispered, "What do you want?" Even though he couldn't hear me, my mind scrambled for explanations. A lost hunter, a stranded hiker, but none of them made sense. No normal person drags a shovel through someone's yard and stares at their door in the middle of the night. I tried calling the sheriff again, but it went straight to the same dispatcher. "Ma'am, stay inside. Keep your doors locked. Deputies are on their way." 30 minutes crept by, then 40. The storm eased into a slow drift, but the man didn't move. I kept staring until my eyes burned. Finally, I saw him shift one careful step backward, then another. He descended the porch steps without turning, shovel still upright. He stepped into the yard and disappeared behind the snow haze. I didn't sleep after that. I couldn't. I waited for dawn, clutching the phone, terrified that if I blinked, he'd be back at the door. Red and blue lights flashed against the snow at dawn. 2 deputies stepped out, their boots sinking halfway into the drifts. I met them on the porch, my voice shaking as I tried to explain what happened, what I saw, what I heard. They didn't treat me like I was crazy. Not out here. Folks in rural counties learn fast that strange things can happen in the dark. "Show us the tracks," one said. I led them into the yard. The storm had softened some of the edges, but the shovel grooves were unmistakable, 2 deep, unbroken trenches leading from the forest straight to my house. They followed them with careful steps. "Ma'am," the deputy called. "Was this here before?" I stepped closer and saw what he meant. The trenches weren't just tracks. They were deeper now, uneven, gouged in places as if the shovel had been dragging something heavy behind it, something weighty enough to sink into the snow like an anchor. A chill rolled up my back. What would he be pulling? The deputies didn't answer. They followed the trail to the tree line, scanning the woods. One of them called out, "We've got something here." My pulse hammered as I approached. Lying half buried in the snow was a second imprint, a long, narrow indentation running alongside the shovel trail. Too big to be an animal, too straight to be fallen branches. It looked like the outline of something wrapped or bundled. One deputy shook his head. Whatever it was, he took it back with him. Or someone, the other muttered under his breath. They marked the area and called for more help, but all I could do was stare at the forest, where the tracks vanished into white shadows. The deputies stayed for hours, combing the woods as far as their ATVs could handle. They found no footprints other than the single set, no signs of a camp or a vehicle, nothing that explained why a man would come out of the forest dragging a shovel toward my home in the middle of a blizzard. Just those long trenches in the snow, and that strange indentation. When the deputies finally finished their search, one approached me. "We'll keep patrols near this area for a few nights. Keep your doors locked, stay alert, and call if you hear anything." I nodded, but the reassurance didn't hold. Nothing about the situation made sense. That night, I sat in the living room with every light on. The storm had passed, leaving a quiet so sharp it felt wrong. I kept replaying the image of him standing on my porch, motionless, shovel held upright, like he was waiting for an invitation he didn't need. I didn't sleep. Every time the wind brushed the siding, I flinched. Every rustle outside felt like footsteps. By morning, the deputies returned for a final sweep. They found the shovel marks leading back into the forest, now even deeper, as if he'd dragged something heavier on the way out. But the man himself? He was gone. No one matched the description in missing persons or local arrest records. No footprints ever led away from the forest. I still live here, though I thought about leaving. Sometimes at night, when the snow falls quietly, I imagine hearing the scrape again, and I can't help thinking, whatever he brought with him that night, he never meant to leave alone. I never thought much about living alone on the far edge of town. People warned me it could feel isolated, but that was the part I liked, the quiet nights, the wide backyard, and the woods stretching behind the house like a soft, dark wall. I grew up in places where neighbors argued through paper-thin walls and sirens never stopped. Out here, all I heard was wind and the occasional owl. When I first moved in, I treated the house like a project. Fresh paint, new locks, security lights, and a motion-activated porch lamp that flicked on every time a stray cat strutted by. I joked about it with coworkers. If anyone wants to murder me, at least I'll get a light show first. They laughed, I laughed, and that was that. Most nights I fell asleep on the couch with the TV murmuring in the background. It felt cozy, safe. So when I drifted off during a late movie that night, nothing felt unusual. The glow of the screen blurred, my mind slipped toward dreams, and the world around me softened, until it didn't. At nearly 3 a.m., the porch light snapped on with a click so sharp it jerked me awake. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes. Probably a raccoon, I thought. They loved knocking over my flower pots. I reached for the remote to mute the TV. Then I heard it, a tap on the sliding glass door. Not random, not clumsy. A clean, deliberate tap like the tip of a fingernail. A cold, thin line ran down my spine. Something or someone was standing on my back porch. When the second tap came, I muted the TV without thinking. The whole house fell silent, and in that stillness I heard my own heartbeat thudding like footsteps inside my chest. I turned my head slowly toward the sliding door. The porch light cast a weak glow, barely reaching the edges of the glass. But in that faint light, I saw him, a tall figure, standing so close his breath fogged the pane, his forehead pressed against the glass, pale in a way that didn't look right. The rest of his face was swallowed by shadow. except for the suggestion of dark hollows, where eyes should have been. I froze. He didn't move. We stared at each other, or maybe he stared at me, and I stared at the space where his eyes should have been. I couldn't tell. Then he said my name. Soft. Quiet. Like he'd practiced it. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. My name isn't common. It's not something a stranger would guess, and I hadn't told anyone I was home. My car wasn't in the driveway. The house looked empty. No lights on except the TV glow, yet he knew. His fingers touched the glass, sliding in slow arcs, leaving thin trails of fog like he was drawing something. I whispered, "Who are you?" But my voice didn't carry. Then he spoke again, calm, measured, like he was commenting on the weather. "I've been here before." The porch light suddenly clicked off, plunging the figure into darkness. I gasped and scrambled backward on the couch, listening for footsteps, for movement, anything, but nothing came. No footsteps, no gate, no sound at all. When I finally looked again, he was gone. The smart thing to do would have been to call someone, friends, police, anybody. But fear does something strange to your logic. It whispers, "Stay quiet. Stay still. Don't draw attention." So that's exactly what I did. I sat on the couch, clutching my phone, staring at the dark sliding door while the house hummed around me. Every now and then, the refrigerator clicked on, or the heater rumbled, and each time I flinched so hard my teeth rattled. I kept replaying his voice in my head, how soft it was, how sure. I've been here before. Had he? I tried to recall anything. Strange noises, missing items, weird shadows. But I couldn't tell if my memories were real, or if my brain was inventing them to make sense of the fear. Hours moved like cold syrup. The house felt too still, too aware. I swear I could feel the air shifting near the sliding door, like someone was standing on the other side, breathing against the glass. By 5 a.m., every light was on. I stood once, thinking I'd check outside, but panic shoved me back down. I stayed put. I waited. When the sky finally faded from black to gray, I forced myself to move. I unlocked the sliding door, slid it open an inch, and let the morning air wash over me. No footprints, no marks, no signs anyone had been there at all, except for one thing. A perfect oval of fog lingered on the outside of the glass, too high to be an animal, too clear to be imagination. A forehead. His forehead. I didn't go to work that morning. I didn't even shower. I went straight to the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and pulled up the footage from my security camera. The porch light had definitely been triggered. I remembered the timestamp. So the camera had to have captured something. But when the video loaded, my stomach twisted. Motion detected. Porch light on. Time. 2:57 a.m. The camera showed the empty porch. No figure. No movement. Not even a flicker. Just the sliding door fogging up on its own. I replayed it 6 times. Same thing every time. Nothing there. Yet I saw him. I heard him. He said my name. I pulled up the audio feed. It was nothing but wind and static. No tapping. No voice. I tried convincing myself I'd fallen asleep and imagined it, but the fog print on the glass was still there. I wiped it with my sleeve, stepped back, and felt a shiver crawl through me. My phone buzzed, my friend Dana checking in. I almost told her everything but stopped myself. Because what would I even say? Hey, someone stood on my porch at 3 a.m., calling my name but somehow didn't show up on camera. She'd think I'd lost it. Around noon, I checked every lock in the house twice. I kept the curtains open, lights on. I walked through every room whispering, "He can't get in. He can't get in." But the truth was simple and heavy. He had gotten close enough to fog the glass, close enough to speak to me, close enough to know I was awake, and now I had no idea if he was gone. That night, I debated staying at a motel, but some stubborn part of me refused to let fear drive me out of my own home. I told myself it was a one-time incident, maybe someone passing through, maybe a hallucination from being half asleep. I locked every door and window and left the living room lamp on. I tried not to look at the sliding door, but the memory of his silhouette kept pulling my eyes back. By midnight, exhaustion dragged at me. I curled up on the couch, telling myself I'd stay awake, but sleep crept in anyway. Sometime later, a click snapped me awake. The porch light. Again, my lungs froze. I didn't move. I waited for tapping, for whispering, for the soft shape of a face pressing to the glass. But nothing happened. I counted to 20, to 50, to 100. Still nothing. Finally, gripping my phone, I slid off the couch and approached the door. My legs trembled so hard the floor creaked beneath me. I reached out and touched the curtain. Before I pulled it back, a voice whispered through the glass. Asterisk, asterisk, you're awake again. Asterisk, asterisk. I stumbled backward, heart slamming against my ribs. When I finally worked up the courage to look, the porch light was still on. The snow was untouched. No footprints, no figure, no shadows. The light clicked off. Silence returned. He had spoken, but he hadn't been there. I haven't slept properly since, because he knew my name. He knew I was awake. And most terrifying of all, he didn't need to be seen to be there. Winter in northern Vermont was supposed to be quiet, peaceful, almost poetic. That was the idea I clung to when I bought my little 2-story house on the edge of town. It had creaky floors, drafty windows, and the kind of charm only someone used to old houses could love. I liked that. I liked being alone. Most people drove out to stay with relatives during storms, but I stayed. I liked the isolation, the wind whipping through the trees, snow piling higher than my front porch, and the silence that followed. Last year, a blizzard hit hard. The roads iced over, and I was stranded for 3 nights. I made a routine of it. Shovel the driveway, keep the fire going, make tea, and watch the storm through fogged-up windows. The first night was peaceful, if exhausting. The second night, though, something changed. Around midnight, the power flickered. The hallway lights pulsed in time with my heartbeat, or at least, that's how it felt. I paused the TV and listened to the usual creaks, groans, and whines of an old house. Then I heard it, a voice, faint, distorted, almost buried in static. It came from the attic above my bedroom. At first, I thought it was the storm, maybe whined through the shingles or an animal trapped somewhere. But it didn't fit. The sound rose and fell like someone speaking to another person, pausing, waiting for a reply. I froze. My stomach turned. No one had keys to my house. The attic had no vents, no pipes, no insulation that could carry sound from outside. And yet, someone or something was there. I tried to rationalize it. It's probably the wind, I whispered to myself, but my voice sounded small, thin, and wrong. I kept listening. The voice repeated, almost in rhythm with my racing heartbeat. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Someone was speaking, waiting for me to answer. I grabbed the flashlight from the hall closet, my hands trembling. Slowly, I pulled down the attic ladder, just far enough to peek inside. My apartment-sized attic had no flooring, just the bare beams and rafters. I shone the light in, and froze. Nothing. Dead silent. No static. No murmuring. Just darkness. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might burst. I was about to push the ladder back up when something changed. It wasn't sound or movement, it was the air. A sudden wave of freezing cold rolled down from the opening, a cold so sharp it burned through my sweater and made my breath fog up instantly. My fingers tightened on the ladder. I backed up, expecting the cold to stop, but it didn't. It poured out like the attic itself was exhaling. Then the voice returned, closer this time, so close I could almost feel it brushing against my face. Clear, calm, controlled. Why did you open it? The ladder slammed shut on its own. Metal rattled in the latch, locking it into place. Hallway lights blinked out. My chest felt like it was being pressed by ice. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. I knew one thing for sure. I was not safe in that house anymore. I didn't sleep in my bed that night. I didn't even try. Instead, I bundled up in my coat, grabbed blankets, and climbed into my car with the engine running. Heat blasted the interior, but it did little to calm me. Every flicker of the dashboard lights made me flinch. Every whisper of wind on the roof sounded like footsteps. I kept the doors locked and stared at the house from the driver's seat. The windows reflected back an empty house, yet I couldn't shake the feeling someone was watching. That voice haunted me, soft, almost casual, yet undeniably real. Asterisk. Why did you open it? Asterisk. I tried calling a friend, but the storm had knocked down cell service. I couldn't reach anyone. All I could do was wait for daylight, listening to the house creak and settle around me. I imagined the attic opening, imagined the cold rolling out again. Every time the wind gusted, I held my breath, sure it was coming for me. Morning couldn't come fast enough. When the sun finally peeked over the snowdrifts, I forced myself out of the car and slowly approached the house, my flashlight in one hand, I dared to reach for the attic ladder. There, in the dust, was a handprint. Not mine, not human-sized. My stomach sank. I pressed my palm against it, half expecting it to burn. The dust was dry, undisturbed by snow or wind. Someone, or something, had been in my attic while I slept, and now the space was warm, uncomfortably warm, like it had been inhabited recently. I backed away slowly, heart hammering, and made a decision. I would not go near that ladder again. The next few days were a haze of fear and denial. I stayed awake most of the time, obsessively checking the attic from the bottom of the ladder. Every sound made me jump pipes, wind, even the cat across the street. Friends called, asking if I was okay. I lied, said the storm had me on edge. They didn't know. I couldn't tell them. Every night, I double-checked locks, set extra lights, and left the TV on in every room. I even installed motion sensors near the attic door, hoping for some rational explanation. The sensors never went off. Nothing appeared to move. Nothing showed on the cameras. Yet the attic remained warmer than the rest of the house, like an invisible inhabitant had taken residence. I tried talking myself into logic. Maybe a raccoon? No, too warm, too deliberate. Maybe a trick of the mind from isolation? The voice was too real, too human, too threatening. I stopped sleeping. Coffee and adrenaline became my lifelines. By the fourth day, I realized I couldn't live like this. I considered leaving town, but obligations kept me tied to the house. I had to endure, but I refused to open the attic again. Each creak, each groan, each flicker of power reminded me that whatever had been in that attic knew I was watching, and that knowledge alone was dangerous enough. Weeks passed, snow melted, roads cleared, and I returned to some semblance of normalcy. I never opened the attic ladder again. I never tried to confront whatever had been up there. My house felt different now, warmer, quieter, and heavier, like it carried a secret I wasn't meant to see. I left the motion sensor active and cameras running, but they showed nothing. The handprint in the dust faded over time, but the memory never did. Sometimes, on still nights, I swear I hear faint murmurs from above. My skin prickles, my stomach knots, and I retreat to the couch, lights blazing. Some places, some spaces, have rules we cannot understand. Some warnings are real, even if we don't see the source. And sometimes, survival isn't about courage, it's about knowing when to stop. I've learned to respect the unknown. I've learned that not all doors are meant to be opened. Some secrets belong to the dark. Not all curiosities are harmless. Sometimes, the act of opening a door or a mind can invite dangers beyond understanding. Respect boundaries, trust instinct, and know when to step back. Survival is often rooted in caution, not bravery. I never expected a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere to feel so alive. When I bought the property, the realtor described it as quaint, full of character. I was 28, single, and craving distance from the city's noise. I thought the creaks, drafts, and peeling paint were charming. Wedge, my shepherd mix, seemed to approve, sniffing every corner as though marking his territory. The first week was peaceful. I unpacked boxes, cleaned cobwebs, and reveled in quiet nights. Then, on the third evening, I noticed it, a faint scratching, like wood shifting under pressure, from the walls. I shook my head. Old houses creak, I told myself. Wedge, however, seemed less convinced. Every time we walked down the hallway, he froze at the crawlspace hatch, growling low. I dismissed it as paranoia until one morning I found the hatch slightly ajar. I never touched it. No one had keys except me. Later, I hired a maintenance worker to inspect it. Halfway through, he bolted, insisting something moved behind him, though no one else was present. Night by night, the noises became patterns. 3 deliberate knocks, long silences, soft tapping near my bedroom floorboards. I began waking with dirt under my nails, though I had no memory of leaving my bed. Wedge refused to sleep anywhere near the hatch, tail tucked, growling at nothing I could see. Something was inside the walls, and I was beginning to think it was waiting for me. Curiosity became obsession. I combed through town records and visited the local library, hoping for some explanation. A neighbor finally told me the house had belonged to a reclusive man named Harold Kessler, who vanished decades ago. He had obsessively recorded voices he claimed lived between the walls, People thought he'd lost his mind. That night, I lay in bed, listening. The usual creaks and taps were there, but beneath them, I thought I heard something else, my own voice. Whispering fragments of things I had only thought privately. My blood ran cold. Wedge's unease worsened. He refused to enter certain rooms, growling at shadows that didn't belong. I tried to explain to myself that fear was contagious, that perhaps I was imagining things, but when I shined a flashlight at the walls, faint shadows seemed to move along the floor, away from the light. The taps became more insistent. 3 knocks, then pauses, then a series of raps that seemed to mark steps toward my bedroom. I started leaving my doors open, just in case something needed to leave on its own. One night, I awoke to a scraping sound beneath my bed. Dirt under my nails again. Wedge whimpered, pacing, ears back. Something was not only living between the walls, it was interacting with me, anticipating me. I realized the house wasn't empty. It was inhabited. It was late October when it happened. I had grown used to the nightly disturbances, though I never relaxed. Wedge refused to leave my side, ears flattened and eyes darting. I was lying awake when I heard the hatch slam open. The sound echoed through the hall like a gunshot. Before I could move, Wedge bolted down the hallway, charging into the crawlspace. I ran after him, heart pounding. Inside, the air was cold and heavy, and I heard frantic scratching, claws against dirt, followed by a bark that was unmistakably Wedge's, but louder, distorted, almost wrong. Then silence. I shone my flashlight across the dirt floor. Wedge's collar lay there, still warm, but he was gone. The earth was disturbed. Footprints stretched across the floor, bare, elongated, toes too long to be human. My stomach turned. A whisper came from behind my ear, my voice, calm, clear. "You shouldn't have followed." I stumbled out, breathing hard, heart hammering. The hatch closed behind me, leaving the floor silent, untouched. I couldn't comprehend it. Wedge was gone, and something had taken him or claimed him. I stayed awake the rest of the night, refusing to go near the crawlspace again. The walls creaked, the floorboards tapped, and a faint whine echoed from the hall like my dog calling me. Something had learned to mimic. The next morning, I called the police. Officers arrived, flashlights and cameras in hand. We opened the crawlspace. It was spotless dust, undisturbed, the floor empty, no footprints, no collar, nothing. Wedge was gone, and nothing in the dirt indicated he'd ever been there. The officers shook their heads. "It's an old house," one said. "Animals, settling, the wind," but I knew better. The house had played tricks on me, or worse, had a life of its own. That night, I barely slept. Every corner, every shadow, every floorboard felt alive. I left lights on, doors locked, but the crawlspace's presence was heavy, palpable. I began packing. I couldn't stay. Not after Wedge vanished, not after hearing my own voice call from the dark below. The house was no longer a home. It was a cage, and I was its prey. As I stacked boxes, I heard the faintest scratching behind my bedroom wall. My blood ran cold. The sound shifted, growing louder. Then it formed a whine, my dog's exact whine, the one he used to get my attention. I froze. Somehow, Wedge or whatever had taken him was still inside, and it had learned my voice too. I left the house at sunrise, locking the doors and dragging boxes into my car. I didn't look back. The air smelled faintly of earth, of old wood, of something breathing just beyond the walls. My phone buzzed with messages from friends, but I didn't answer. I didn't need witnesses. I just drove, keeping my eyes on the road, praying the house would fade behind me. That night, miles away, I swore I heard a scratching, faint, deliberate, coming from my bedroom wall back at the farmhouse. A whine followed Wedge's exact whine. My stomach dropped. Some doors should never be opened. Some voices should never be heard. And some presences, once invited even unknowingly, never truly leave. I've learned that curiosity can carry consequences far beyond imagination. The house remained standing at the edge of town, silent to the eye, but alive in ways I can't explain. I never returned, and I never will. Some boundaries exist for a reason. Curiosity can uncover truths that are better left hidden, and ignoring instincts or the signs of something unnatural can invite danger that may never let you go. Respect your intuition. Survival sometimes depends on caution, not courage. I didn't plan to be alone in the mountains, but that's how it worked out. The cabin belonged to my uncle, a rickety 2-story lodge perched on a ridge where cell service never reached, and the nearest neighbor was miles away. Nimbus, my 12-year-old cat, was the only other occupant. I had thought a week alone would be a welcome escape, books, firewood, and the storm rattling outside. The first night, the wind blew so hard I thought the windows would shatter. Nimbus huddled by the fireplace, occasionally lifting his head to scan the dark corners of the cabin. I reassured myself that old houses groan in the cold, that cats are jumpy creatures. The third night, it happened. I was curled up reading when I heard it. 3 soft knocks at exactly 1:13 a.m. Slow, polite, intentional. My heart skipped a beat. I jumped up and opened the porch door. Nothing. Snow piled thick, wind whipping around, but not a person in sight. Only one muddy boot print faced the door. Beside it sat a small wooden figurine, a human shape with its hands over its eyes. My stomach churned. I tossed it into the fire, watching it blacken and twist. Nimbus hissed, arching his back, tail fluffed high, refusing to leave my side. I tried to laugh it off. Probably someone playing a prank, I said, though my voice sounded weak, even to me. The storm raged on outside, and the cabin felt suddenly smaller, more vulnerable. I didn't sleep, not that night, or the nights after, as the storm howled and the sense of being watched settled in like a shadow I couldn't shake. The fourth night, I woke to Nimbus staring at the cabin door, his low growl vibrating through the floorboards. Outside, barely visible under the porch light, a tall, thin silhouette stood perfectly still. I shouted, "Nothing, just snow and shadow." My pulse pounded as I leaned against the doorframe. Nimbus pressed against my legs, trembling, eyes locked on the figure. By morning, snow revealed only one set of footprints circling the cabin in tight, endless loops. I checked every lock. Everything had been secured the night before. Yet, the front door was unlocked, and there it was, a new figurine, carved to depict a human with its hands covering its ears. I froze. I remembered the first one, hands over the eyes. The new figure's gesture made sense. It wasn't random. Someone had placed them deliberately, in sequence. Each evening, at 1:13 a.m., the knocks continued, gentle, polite. Each time I found a new figurine, each one more unnatural than the last. I couldn't explain it. My phone had no service. The generator sputtered and died, leaving the cabin in the low hum of the storm. Nimbus refused to leave my side, hissing at shadows that didn't belong, stiff and wary of corners where I saw nothing. I tried to tell myself it was a prank or some local eccentric, but the methodical nature, the timing, the gestures was too precise, too deliberate. And deep down, I realized, the sequence wasn't over. That night, sleep was impossible. I wrapped myself in a blanket, lighting the fireplace and keeping Nimbus close. Around 1:13 a.m., instead of the usual knocks, silence fell. The cabin felt thicker somehow, heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Then I heard it. Slow, measured breathing. Inside, near my bedroom door. Nimbus growled at first, then went rigid, ears flattened. The cat pressed himself against me, trembling. My hands shook as I reached for the flashlight, heart hammering. I opened the bedroom door. Nimbus sat rigidly at the threshold, staring at something invisible, tail tucked, fur bristling. On the floor, the latest figurine had appeared, hands wrapped tightly around its own throat. I swallowed hard, voice stuck in my throat. The fourth form. The pattern made sense now. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. The last figure choking was a warning I hadn't understood. The snow outside hadn't been walked on by anyone at all that night, yet something had been inside the cabin, moving with purpose. I called out, my voice barely more than a whisper. Nothing answered. Only the crackle of the fire and the low, tense hum of Nimbus's growl. My stomach sank. Whoever or whatever had left the figurines had come inside. I felt the weight of unseen eyes, the air heavy with intent, and I realized that the carvings were not threats. They were instructions, warnings left by someone who had learned what lived in the storm, in the snow, in the spaces humans overlook. I couldn't leave. The snowstorm had trapped me, roads impassable. Every time I tried to rationalize, Nimbus reminded me otherwise, staring corners down, hissing at shadows that shifted with no source. The figurines continued to appear in impossible places. On the table, beside my chair, even on the mantel. Each one replicated a gesture: eyes, ears, mouth, throat, like someone had choreographed a warning dance. My anxiety grew. I began pacing, checking doors, peeking out windows. No footprints. No tracks outside besides the looping prints from earlier nights. Nothing. The air grew colder than the storm, a biting draft that didn't match the broken windows or the fire. I realized the fourth figurine, the strangled one, had appeared inside, placed beside Nimbus. My cat stared straight ahead, ears twitching, tail rigid, refusing to move. I felt a creeping sense of wrongness. It wasn't the intruder I feared, it was whatever rules this place had. My own rationality faltered. I whispered to Nimbus, "We need to survive until morning." But even I didn't know how. The storm outside howled, snow piling higher, and I understood in that instant. The cabin had its own intelligence. It observed, it punished, it taught. I stayed awake that night, holding Nimbus, flashlight shaking, listening to the echoes of breathing and wind. I realized the figurines weren't just warnings, they were lessons in survival for anyone alone in this place. Dawn arrived, gray and silent. I stumbled to the window. Snow covered every track. The cabin looked innocuous again, serene. I exhaled shakily. Scanning the porch, no figurines outside. I went to the table. Another figurine sat there, hands covering its throat. Nimbus refused to approach. I understood. The figurines were warnings, left by someone who had survived the storm. Someone who knew the rules. Observe, respect, and never provoke what lives unseen. The intruder or whatever had placed them wasn't outside anymore. The lesson had been delivered. I packed quickly, carrying Nimbus, shivering in exhaustion. The cabin stood quiet behind me, snow piling higher with each hour. I glanced back once. Silence. Shadows seemed still, obedient, as if waiting for the next traveler who ignored the warnings. Curiosity can be fatal if you disregard what you do not understand. Some spaces carry knowledge we are not meant to grasp. Some warnings are meant to be obeyed. Even now, whenever I hear a knock at the wrong hour, I remember the sequence, the figurines, Nimbus's warning growl, and I never, ever, ignore it. Some warnings exist for a reason. Curiosity can expose truths too dangerous to comprehend, and survival often depends on heeding signals we cannot fully explain. Respect boundaries, trust instinct, and know that some knowledge is better left untouched.